Okay, I think we're live. Let me check here. All right, yes, we are. Guys, thank you very much for joining me today. We've got a fantastic show for you because I've got a fantastic guest, somebody that I've been meaning to talk to for a little while now. So I'm very happy to finally welcome Rajiv Satyal to the show. Rajiv, welcome.
Good to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Do you go by Sham? You go by Sham? I assume Sham.
Sham, yeah. But every American that I've so far run into, when they first read it, they go Sham. So I have to kind of course correct
Which
them a
is a
little bit.
sham. It's ironic.
Yeah, that's
That's
true.
good.
Exactly right. So how long have you been doing comedy for?
13 years full time.
Wow. What got you started in comedy?
So my brother found an article in the local paper. It was funniest person in Cincinnati contest. I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. I entered
Right.
it. I made the semifinals out of 64 people, I think it was. And the next
Wow.
year I won it, and it just went from there.
Wow. What did you always have an interest, or were you just like, all right, let me just try this competition out?
Yeah, I was interested in humor and jokes. And,
Hmm.
a friend of mine recently said, he goes, well, actually, you've been doing stand up since you were 13. I was like, what do you mean? He goes, dude, all those like Diwali programs, holy programs, all things you used to MC in Cincinnati, the basic community was there. And you were up there doing material and impressions in front of 1,000 people. He goes, that's stand up. And I was like, yeah, I guess. He goes, no, come on, man. It's like, that's full on shows. He goes, all you have to do is MC, but he goes, you would bring jokes, and you would bring material, and you would be, commenting on politics and on comedy and all these things that you saw. And I was like, yeah, I guess I wouldn't be pretentious or precocious enough to say that I started when I was 13, but I'd say I started getting an interest in comedy around the age of 9, and then started, I guess you could say, performing around 13.
That's pretty cool, man. Did you have some like comedians that you looked up to when you were growing up, whether or not you were in comedy at that point? Were there comedians that you looked up to?
No, it's
Mm,
interesting because I don't actually get a lot of my influence from women stand-up comedy. I
right.
had only probably heard 4 albums, heard or seen. So the very first one I ever heard, sorry to say, it was Bill Cosby himself, which still stands the test of time. They were talking about it on comedians in cars getting coffee. Seinfeld was
Right.
talking about it and whether or not you could still appreciate Cosby, and they came to the conclusion that it's very difficult to do it. But to look at his earlier work,
Mm,
pre all the things he did, at least we believe, that
right.
is a great album, and it's from a long time ago. So I heard that, and that was the first time I'd ever heard stand up. And I was like, wow, that is a really different medium. I remember thinking that. I don't think I even knew the word medium yet. I was a
Right.
kid, but I was thinking this is so different. And then the other ones that I heard, and they are very all over the place. Stephen Wright, I Have a Pony. I heard Dennis Leary, No Cure for Cancer. I heard Dennis Miller, the Off-White album. And then I think that's everything except for Eddie Murphy Raw, which I probably saw 5 times.
Wow. That is Eddie Murphy's Raw is one that like a lot of comedians quote as well because it's such an amazing piece of work too. One of the interesting things about you that I find that you were born in the United States, right?
Yeah, I was born in
Yeah.
Cincinnati.
Yeah, you're an American, and you're an American of Indian origin. Let's put it that way. And one of the things that I've noticed in the short time that I've been here, and in the small sample size that I have, is a lot of people of Indian origin that were born and raised in the United States. Now, I might be wrong because again, this is a small sample size in my experience only. But what I've noticed is that they almost work very hard to detach themselves from their Indian roots and their Indian identity in a lot of ways. At least in Chicago, that's what I've noticed.
Okay.
You, on the other hand, embrace it. You embrace it. You had this amazing video that I Am Indian on YouTube, which has gone crazy viral, and everybody loves that video. And is that something that you do consciously? Is that something that you notice, or do you think that's just my small sample size?
It's a great question about small sample sizes. Well, I personally think that, Jerry Seinfeld, not to go right back to him again, but one of the
Right.
giants in her field, obviously, talked about how stand-up comedy is a journey into oneself. And as someone who's into meditation and yoga and all that stuff, I always thought that was a very interesting way of putting it. I would, if I could modify Seinfeld, if that's allowed, I would say it's a public journey into oneself, which is
Yeah.
very interesting because you're on a private journey, but the public sees you do it, right? So when I just performed my latest show here in Los Angeles, I've had friends who've been seeing me now they saw the man in the middle, but they have seen me perform before. And, the feedback is, wow, you've really grown as a performer, and the things you're tackling are different. And they are, because we all talk about different things as we get older, right? I mean, when I was 8 or 9 years old, all I could talk about was Transformers, and I was obsessed with Transformers, and that's pretty much all I would talk about. And now it's too bad that the things that brought you joy as a kid don't as an adult, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if I used to measure, there's a consumer price index, and they look at the cost of different items and how they rise. I used to measure everything in terms of extra value meals from McDonald's. Like, as long as I can buy an extra value meal from McDonald's, I'm set. And now it's like, yeah, when I take my wife out, I don't think the extra value meal at McDonald's is going to be. She's a Taco Bell girl. What can I say? So, but no, we got to go somewhere nicer, right? And now you want a nicer car, or you want to do different things. You talk about different things. I used to talk to my parents. I'm like, how can you guys talk about politics and economics? Isn't that stuff boring? Why don't you talk about toys? Why don't you talk about, like, cartoons? And they're like, you'll understand when you get older. You won't be able to talk about that anymore. So I have some friends who still can, by the way. And I don't know what that says about
I mean, the last 10 years have all been about that, right? The nerds have kind of taken over.
Hipsters and nerds and all that kind of stuff. Absolutely. So, and I stopped eating cereal in my 20s. I ate cereal every day from probably age 5 till 28, and I cut it out. So at any rate, I feel like this is what has happened with me, is that I've embraced my Indian roots. It isn't really a conscious decision, but you do, I grew up in the world of branding, and you do look at what sets you apart, and you go, all right, you're clean, you're Indian. There are some other strands as well. So I've tried to explore those, and it just kind of comes out that way. And I feel like as long as the act, if you're going to do a 60-minute act, I feel like, it's fair that 10 to 15% of that would lean fairly heavily into the Indian identity.
Right.
That is definitely part of who I am. It's not all 60 minutes, but, it's 10 to 15% of the set, which I feel feels right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. That's why I think your case is interesting, because what I've felt like, for people that are of Indian origin that grew up here, and again, in my small sample size, what I've noticed is them trying to, like, really, turn away from their Indian identity. It makes me think that, to be an American, you don't need to completely disassociate from who you are. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and to each his own. But
right.
My wife and I were talking about this because we're invited to a Diwali party, and and several, of course, it's that time of year. But I have always enjoyed the melting pot aspect of America.
Right.
So when people turn completely away from their identities. When I did the first run of my first one-person show, I had a reading at my place, and I had several of the Indian actors that you probably would know. They came over, and then I had a fairly mixed crowd, Black, white, Latino, Asian, Indian. And it was interesting when I talked about arranged marriage and our culture and going to India. I had several of the white folks in the room saying, give me more of that. They're like, right. I kind of already know about Tinder. I kind of already know about, dating and not finding someone, and even the expectations of being a doctor. I think Desis believe that that's only in our community. It's not. Most parents want their kids to be doctors, whether they're brown or white or whatever. So that is there. But the feedback I remember hearing over and over was, give us more of your world. What is that cultural take like? Because we can get the other stuff from Jerry Seinfeld and Chris Rock and Bill Burr. And so we want to hear what your take is as a Desi, as an Indian American. That said, I also don't like when I go to parties and it's all Desi music,
right.
Or all Latino, or all Black, or all white. I'm like, right. We're in America, man. Like, let's mix it up. Let's have some mashups. Like I don't want to go listen to 3 hours of Indian music. I live in this country. Mix it up with some Latin beats. Give me some hip hop. Give me some rock. Give me a guitar. Like that's what I want. I mean, it's just funny how some of these kids go from, they totally disown their Indian identity. They get on the floor and they're just all full Punjabi. And they're like, okay, well, that's cool, but can we I know that's not who you are only. Can you do some of that outside as well? Like, they only do that when the doors are closed and the windows are up, right? So
right.
I heard that was what was true about Beware the Boys by Punjabi MC and Jay-Z. Yep. They said that Desis in this country, especially in Chicago, I remember this was the case as well. They would listen to Desi music with the windows up, and that gave them permission to put the windows down.
Wow, that's pretty cool. That's a really cool way to put it. One of the other things that I've noticed, and in comedy is what certain changes that have, I feel like, come about in comedy with the proliferation of social media. I mean, I think in a large measure, it's a very good thing for comedians, stand-up comics trying to get their name out there. Social media has been an absolutely fantastic boon, and your video that I am Indian, that's a great example of that, of what a fantastic thing that is with social media. But do you think that when you started, because you started 13 years ago full time, and back then, social media wasn't really as prevalent as it is now, do you think it has changed comedy in any way?
Yeah, I mean, they do say that there's upsides and downsides like there are to most things, right? I mean, it depends on how you use it. And I think social media broadly is this way, that it can lead to feelings of isolation and loneliness. And if used the wrong way, sure, I think that it's the hit of dopamine that everybody has talked about. But if used the right way, and my parents are getting older, it's a way for us to stay in touch. It's a way for them to connect with friends from the motherland. And, my mom is talking to folks back in Allahabad, and, my dad as well, he's watching cricket, and that's great to connect with that, and they're also connecting with their friends here, white friends, black friends, etc., who are here and around the world, or family in Australia, people like that. That's great, but it's like if it's used the right way, right? And I think with comedy, the good thing is, you can find your audience, right? And there's a book that came out maybe a decade ago called 1,000 True Fans, and it was like, if you can find 1,000 people who can spend $100 a year on you, you got a career, right? You're not going to ball out. You're not going to be rich, but you're also not going to starve, because that's $100,000 a year. Can you sell them T-shirts? Can you sell them tickets? Can can there be an album? Can there be some way that they can get value from you, not just give you $100? Like, can you go tour and stuff like that? Although that's always welcome as well. So, but there's the idea of getting that, finding your audience, finding your base. That's one of the good sides. One of the downsides, I think that, Chris Rock talked about this, that he would never have been able to write Niggas versus Black People. He and Louis C.K., rest in peace, actually wrote that bit together. And, he's like, I never would have been able to put that out, because just the N-word in and of itself would have just blown up the internet, and you're just not even allowed to say it. And he goes, but that turned into, in my opinion, probably the best bit of all time.
Right.
The time to workshop that bit over the years and over the months and over the weeks to get it right. But now you look at what just happened with Louis, and they leaked his set, his audio set. Obviously what he did was wrong, but I was hoping, and his latest set that was leaked did not do this, but I was hoping for his definitive take on Me Too, what happened to him, all of that stuff. And the stuff he was doing was really not up to snuff. But we're evaluating it from, it's not ready for prime time yet.
Right.
So, but it's not special yet. And I wonder if we would have given him another year to really come up with something insightful. I don't know the dude. I think what he did was wrong, but I think we all lose out when stuff like that is leaked, and we can't get the true essence and the true core of what somebody's saying, because somebody says a word or a trigger word, and they're all, well, he said that word, it's out, that's done, it's over. It's like, let's look at the intent, let's look at the source, let's look at the context of what's being said. And I think that's what's being lost in this day and age.
Yeah, it is crazy, right? Because like when you're probably preparing, for a show, you go test the material out. Whatever you've written, you go test it out. You perform it at a couple of places. You're like, oh, that worked. Oh, that didn't work. So let me tweak it this way. Let me change it this way. Let me put that in. Let me take this out. And then when you go onto the show, it clicks. The audience is laughing. So you worked at it for like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, however long, it is that your process is. But you worked at it. You took stuff out, you put stuff back in. And I completely agree that's how I felt when that Louis bit was leaked as well. I felt like, all right, this is clearly not this guy's final. This is not the final edition of this joke. This isn't. This is just a guy that's in the comedy club trying it out, looking for how the audience reacts to what he's saying. And depending on what the audience feels, he's going to tweak it. I mean, Louis C.K. is not a novice. This is sure, what he's done is horrible, but the art still stands on its own merit. What he's done in the last 10 years stands on its own merit. He's one of the best out there. So clearly, this is not a guy that's just out there to trigger people.
Yeah, no, definitely. There are shock jocks and there are those people, but in my opinion, he was never one of them. And I think I just think it's disingenuous because when you look at someone like Bill Cosby, he presented himself as, Cliff Huxtable, Fat Albert, America's dad. And I mean, America does rape a lot of countries, so maybe it is. So maybe, maybe he is America. Maybe he is our best.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, I just feel like, with Louis, he was so open about the fact that debates that he calls his daughter an a-hole, that he's the guy who was always saying the stuff that people are going, oh my gosh, I cannot believe he just said that. But they stayed and they were like, oh, I can't say that, but you said it, and so I'm laughing at it. And that's kind of what comedy is. It's cathartic to a lot of people. And they say that good theater is therapeutic for the performer and the audience. Bad theater is just therapeutic for the performer.
Yeah.
Right? The audience is going, okay, when is this done? When is this over? How long is this going to be? But, I think a lot of the things he was saying, it was sad because he, Bill Burr, Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock, that's my Mount Rushmore of at least this millennium of people who are hilarious and saying something. There are a lot of comics out there who are hilarious, but they're not giving you anything you can take home.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people who are, saying a lot, but they're kind of like, they're a chuckle. They're not really a belly laugh. But to find that Venn diagram overlap, I just feel like there's something missing from my life now. I used to look for his latest special, like a lot of people look for a band and, the stuff that saved them over the years. So, it's awful what he did. And I can separate the product from the producer. But I also do feel like he needed a better apology. I don't really feel like he apologized. And I do think that's important to do.
Yeah, on along that same theme, I read your review of Dave Chappelle's Sticks and Stones on Medium, and I thought you had a really good take on Dave Chappelle's special as well, because you look at Dave Chappelle's special on Rotten Tomatoes, and the audience score and the critic score is like, it's worlds apart.
Yeah.
And what are critics missing, do you think, that the audience isn't?
It's a great
or the other way around, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a friend of mine said this recently, and I think he found an article online that said nothing illustrates the divide between the elites and the commoners more than Rotten Tomatoes.
That is for sure, man.
Observation, because cancel culture and call out culture and all the people on the left, the social justice warriors, which is why my show is The Man in the Middle. I'm not all the way left because I feel this way, however we want to do it for the screen. But for me, it drives me insane because I'm going, guys, you're not letting people talk. You're not looking at the context and whatever else. And so, it's just trigger words like, oh, he said rape. And, oh, well, that's it. He's a man. He can't talk about rape. Or, a friend of mine, Nimesh Patel, was pulled off stage in New York because he was talking about, he did a funny joke where he goes, it's pro LGBTQIA, right? Hopefully that's woke enough for everybody. LGBTQIA star. And he says, a black gay man, he's like, he's already black. Why would he also choose to be gay? Right. And it's obviously a pro, gay rights joke because he said, it's not a choice. He's born this way. And literally
That's a good joke. That's a really good joke.
He's a good joke writer. And, these three women came to the stage, Asian women came to the stage evidently, and took the mic away from him and silenced him and said, you can't tell that joke because you're not black and gay. And you're going, dude, that it's fiction. Like, I'm telling stories. And, if we allow that to happen where we're just shutting down speech and going, well, unless you belong to that group, there's an inherent condescension there because people need to stop being offended on other people's behalf. Yeah. And that's what's happening. It's like, you're saying, oh, you know what, black gay people, don't joke about them. It's like, you know what, don't condescend to them. They can defend themselves. They're strong people. Even the disabled, people in wheelchairs, you don't need to fight for them. They can fight for themselves. Yeah. And by saying, well, I'm going to be their voice, aren't you the one who's kind of being a dick because you're taking their voice away and saying you're offended. You're making it about you. And it's like, it's not about you. Let them fight their fight. This is social media. We have a platform. Let them speak for themselves and stop taking the mic away from people because it's not up to you, man. It's just not up to you.
Yeah, no, for sure. And there's a super chat here on YouTube, and they're wondering, there's problems obviously with the woke culture and sort of progressive movement and political correctness. Do you think there's a necessary evil in there too, or no?
A necessary evil in the sense,
do you think there's positive aspects to the sort of woke culture
Oh,
movement that we see these days?
Definitely, definitely. I think we're talking about the downsides of it, which do need to be addressed. But I mean, the idea that society moves forward and it's more inclusive, and we think about things. There's an awareness of, just like when there was ADA, and now we have to think about people in wheelchairs and how are they going to get up the stairs. And my mom is getting older. We just went to New York City, and we're looking at sidewalks for her and how many stairs she can climb. And yes, you want an inclusive world. And so when people are coming out, my brother is gay and he lives in New York. And so you said you're, I don't know if you talk about your family or you've got a connection to Wisconsin, right?
Right.
So
yeah.
My brother's husband is from a small town in Wisconsin as well. So the idea being that being inclusive is, to me, it's always, what I say to my brother is this. I go, of course we want to be inclusive, but come on, the gay voice is still funny, right? It's hilarious. Like RuPaul's still funny. And like, I can still laugh at people going like this. So I did this the other day. I told this to my friend. I haven't posted it yet, but I go, the other day I was on the New Jersey Transit and my bag fell, like the train lurched and the bag fell into this woman's ankle, like the back of her ankle. I don't know what the back shin. And I went, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Because I felt like she'd be less angry at a gay man now.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
That's some straight douchebag. I'm like,
I'm sorry about that, man.
I feel like she won't be as bad. And she wasn't. She was like,
that's amazing, man. Somebody's going to try that out.
I'm going to get it so bad for that.
Yeah.
So I tell it, my friend, she just goes, that's hilarious. She goes, yes, it is offensive, but it's funnier that it's offensive, right? Like that's so wrong. But they're like, but come on, that's funny, right? And so I think it's more a question of like, is it funnier that it is offensive?
You basically summed up a lot of stand-up comedy, isn't it? Like a lot of it can be seen as offensive, but generally speaking, if it's funnier than it's offensive, then it works, right?
Absolutely. Like, and there's things that are incidental, right? So like there's a joke, an old joke. I'll give a really good example. That's what I think is a good example. There's an old joke that says, these two guys are talking and one says to the other, I got this bottle of vodka from my mother-in-law. And his friend goes, that sounds like a good trade. And it's a great joke. But in this day and age, you can modify that to say two women are talking. And one says to the other, I got this bottle of vodka from my mother-in-law. Sounds like a good trade. To the extent that we can upgrade jokes like that, the humor is not lost because it has nothing to do with the gender. But women can hear that and go, oh, it's two men talking about a woman. Take that out of the equation. Just say it's two women speaking, right? And then you've neutralized that. Or two people. But the problem with saying two people or two persons or two human beings is then you lose the context because you have to be able to put a picture into the person's mind. You say two humans are standing on Earth. It's like, well, that doesn't tell me enough.
It's like when you do the so and so walked into a bar, but with two humans, you just lose the joke entirely.
It's absolutely true. And it's funny because these lessons come in different ways. Like I was reading some jokes online, just jokes online. I do that. Comedians do that, read joke books, etc. And somebody wrote a real buzzkill of a comment, and it was like, it was a joke about a scientist or a pharmacist or something, and it used the pronoun he. And then somebody commented, it's things like this that reinforce the fact that only chemists or pharmacists or whatever can be men. Why isn't the joke she? Oh my God. And I read it and I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? But that stayed with me. And I was like, that person has a point. That person has a point, because when comedians are on stage and we say a doctor is she, because she is sexualized in jokes, right? She walked into the bar. Ooh, what's going to happen? Like, well, that's bad. Like, it shouldn't be that women are sexualized like that, and then men are asexual, especially South Asian men are generally asexualized, and females are hypersexualized, right? That's not an original observation, but it's true. That said, to the extent that we can change the jokes and modify them and nothing is lost, or even if a little bit is lost, but the humor is still there, I think that's good. You're looking at the trans community, they're only, 1% of the population? So how much should the tail wag the dog? Well, to the extent that we can be inclusive and we can say cisgendered and transgendered, it's good, man. These things are good. It's good to be inclusive. Comedy evolves. It changes. But I think we have to have a sense of humor about it. And the fact that you can put a gay voice on when your bag falls into somebody's shin, if people are offended by that, well, then they're just being disingenuous, because that's funny.
Yeah, I really do think so. I think that is funny. I think it's hilarious that you did that. And I think a lot of people will find that funny. And I've got one of my fiance's really good friends is gay, and I think the kind of guy he is, I think he'd really enjoy that part. He'd really enjoy that story, and it brings me back to that whole Dave Chappelle's show, that special that he did. And one of the big criticisms of that show, wasn't it, that he's punching down against the trans community, which I didn't really see it. I can see how somebody can construe it that way 100%. But then I think intent matters as well. Like, that's not, in my opinion, what he's trying to do. You have every right to construe that he is doing that. But then I think it is, again, disingenuous to suggest that he's trying to just shit on the trans community. That's not what he's trying to do. If you actually sit down and watch the special and not get offended at a Netflix clip on YouTube, I think context is important in that way, isn't it?
It is, and it's hard to say, right? I think one side of it is, and this is one of the points I made in the article, which I appreciate you read, which is it's difficult for Black people to punch down. I mean, Black people live in America.
Yeah, that too. There you go.
Hard, right? And so, and then, I had a comment from somebody who is very liberal, and this is, the man in the middle, right? Like, when I say something and my far right or my far left friends disagree, I'm like, well, then I'm playing it in the middle, because you're not going to be everything to everyone. I grew up in branding. You target everybody, you target nobody. So there are going to be people even with my current show who aren't, and I say I'm very blatant about it. If you're in the 15, to me, it's probably 10% on the far left and maybe 15 on the far right. I do feel it's a little bit imbalanced, but I think that they're going to hate the show, right? Because the ultimate idea of the show is we got to move forward together. So, but that said, I think with Chappelle, you look at a lot of, yes, he's still a man. Yes, if you look at, he's sexual, he's able-bodied, he's not white, but he's cisgendered and straight and all those things. That's true, but man, I don't think that you can say that Black men in America have exactly had it easy. And I have a friend who's probably even taller than Chappelle. I think he's 6'4", 6'5". He's Black, and he wears, this is funny, this is like the gay thing. He's not gay, but he lives in DC, and he wears a bow tie. And the reason he wears a bow tie, and this drives his wife crazy, and she's also Black, it drives her crazy, but I was dying laughing. He says it makes him, I go, are you Muslim? Because you think of a bow tie, right? There's enthusiasm where Larry David asks a Black man wearing a bow tie, he goes, are you Muslim? He goes, what, do all Black? He's like, well, that's just what I see. He's not Muslim, he's Christian. He wears it because it makes him more fun and less threatening. And it's interesting. Oh, that's so lame. You've got so much style and you're wearing these bow ties. You look so dumb. And he goes, I'm not going to get shot. I feel like I'm more playful if I get pulled over. I've got a bow tie. It's like a turban, for a turban, but they also wear a flag. You're right.
Yeah. You're right. That's kind of sad.
People who just walk around with a turban.
Yeah.
God bless you, man. I don't know how that takes some serious balls. I don't know how you do it.
Especially at least in the United States, and I think in somewhere like Britain, there's still a bit more of an understanding of the difference between a Muslim and a Sikh. But I feel like in the United States, there really isn't.
Not really all.
Isn't. Yeah. So kudos to those guys for sticking with it.
Oh, they're OGs, and I think it's amazing. I'm jealous that they have something to cover their heads. We just go bald.
You know what's funny though? A lot of them don't. Like Manmohan Singh, the Indian Prime Minister, he didn't. He just wears it, so it makes you think that there's something up there.
Yeah,
but there isn't. So that's kind of smart too.
See, white people, they have the do-rag. Black people have the skull caps. Jews have the yarmulke. Hindus were just screwed. That's it.
We just gotta let it breathe. Yeah, let it breathe up in the air. Let's talk about your tour. Yeah, The Man in the Middle, and I really like the name. I think it's a very relevant name. It's a very important name. And while, before we really go into talking about Man in the Middle and what's the idea behind it, one of the things that I have noticed, and now I wonder if you agree or disagree, that a lot of comedy, at least mainstream comedy in America, is very left-leaning. Like, you look at most of the major political comedy shows on TV, you have Colbert, very left-leaning. You have, Hassan Minhaj, another Indian comedian, just got his own show on Netflix, very left-leaning. Seth Meyers, Daily Show, Trevor Noah, They're all very left leaning. And I wonder if you see a bit of a problem there, because I do. Because when I look at Trevor Noah, and Trevor Noah is an insanely gifted comedian, and you have to be if you want to get a job on the Daily Show.
Right.
So he's a very gifted comedian, but it really makes me miss Jon Stewart sometimes, because Jon Stewart went after everyone.
Mhm.
Anybody who watched Jon Stewart cannot tell Jon Stewart that, yeah, he's a liberal. 100% Jon Stewart's a liberal. But you cannot level an allegation against Jon Stewart that he didn't go after the Democrats. And
Definitely.
so I wonder if you see that as a trend the way I do, or if you disagree.
I agree with you. I think that, there's been a lot of research done as to why most comedy is liberal, right? And there's been some debunking of journalism in that, and journalism and comedy are different. I'll come back to comedy. But with journalism, I feel like one thing they say is reporters, I think it's like 88, 89% of them vote Democrat. But what people forget is that a lot of the editors vote Republican. And, the liberal media, yes, it leans left. It does. But it does give both sides a lot more than people do give credit for. It leans left. I'm not saying it doesn't, but I think that the outlets like Fox are blatantly conservative, and they call themselves that. And in the beginning, they said fair and balanced, and now they just totally threw that out the window. During the day, a lot of the reporting on news is a little bit more balanced, but then most people watch stuff in prime time, which is why you wanted me on earlier, and I didn't come on earlier. So that's my fault, everybody. But I think with comedy, there's been a lot of research as to, because you're throwing dirt uphill or downhill, right? Punching up or punching down. And usually, there's an old quote by Mort Sahl, the comedian, and it was something like, he was talking about the New York Times being a liberal paper. I think it was this. And he said, the headline in the New York Times, you can imagine it, so liberal, it's going to be "World Ends. Women and minorities hit hardest." Right. And it's like the greatest grilling of the media, right? And even though he leans left. But I think the idea of wanting to advocate for disadvantaged groups generally means that comedy is going to be, you're going to be punching up. And the up is generally conservative. But I had a conversation with a friend of mine back in the day who said, that's so interesting. He goes, and he's 20 years older, he's white. He said, I always thought of the establishment as liberal. And I was like, that's so weird. He goes, no, because they're always pushing things down our throat. Like even the Obama administration made a lot of the changes with LGBT stuff in textbooks. And they do stuff with Islam. And they do things like that where they sort of put it on people. And right or wrong, but we need to have a debate about it before we just indoctrinate children with it, with critical gender theory or race theory and intersectionality. I'm not saying those things are right or wrong, but they're not widely accepted by society yet. And I think that's where, even if you look at the Supreme Court and stuff with abortion or any of the other issues, they don't get too far out front of the public because they're trying to reflect the public more than they're trying to lead it. And so I do see where conservatives go, can there be conservative comics? It's hard, right? I mean, Dennis Miller is funny and he's conservative, but his humor when he talks about he's funny anyway, but when he talks politics, I don't think it's as funny. I think that Gutfeld is similar in that it's hard. Waters, this guy on Fox News, I think it's hard because it just sort of reinforces the establishment, and that's not really Colin Quinn did a bit about that in his Red State, Blue State, because he did his shows about politics as well. It aired on CNN. And one of the most brilliant things that he did, it was kind of a throwaway. He talked about, I'm going to get this wrong, but he said something about how, why are you contradicting what society is saying? And he was talking about liberal, woke, social justice warrior stuff. He goes, yeah, that's why I became a comedian, to just reinforce what the rest of society thinks. Right? And so it was brilliant. It's like every comedian's like, yeah, dude, like we have to be the ones who are out there getting bloodied, saying things that other people can't say, because if we're not pushing that envelope, then who's going to do it?
Okay. Yeah, no, that's true. I wonder if what you make of this theory that, in the 60s, 70s, and to some extent in the 80s, the conservatives were the establishment. And so the pushback against it, the liberal pushback against it, was seen as, that pushing against the establishment. But I feel like since the 2000s, the establishment, at least the cultural establishment, is more liberal. the cultural zeitgeist, whatever you want to call it, is more liberal. All the ideas in there are usually liberal ideas. So in terms of culture, do you think that there's a point to be made that the cultural establishment is liberal, and so maybe poking some fun at that uh, is probably something that's a good thing too?
Yeah, that's a very good observation, Sham, because you've got the idea that the cultural, I think that's where a lot of white men, I'm from Ohio, right? So to what Donald Trump has done for a lot of people, it has been to give them that sense of you belong as well. Because I obviously hate the president. I rail against him all the time. Not in the show. The show is a lot more up the middle. But I can't stand him. I think we're at a crisis point. But you know, I can understand the concept of, you know, I was watching this Vice. I was watching, I think it was Vice on HBO, and it was showing white racists in Alabama. And you know, you want to go in there. It's almost like, you know, it's almost like hate porn. You want to watch it. Like, yeah, screw these guys. Let's watch them. Like, what, you know, screw these racists. And there's a point where one of the, you know, it is Alabama, heavier white men is sitting there in a lawn chair, I think it was, or maybe I'm just dressing it up with what my impression is of that in the South. But you know, he starts crying, and he's a grown man, and he's crying, and he's talking about how we used to have things in this country, now we don't have anything. And you know, human to human, if you're being a human, I can almost tear up now thinking about him. You got to have some empathy for this dude, man. Like, you can't just be like, well, screw them, and they're part of the establishment. Like, he doesn't feel part of the establishment. Like, he's been left out, and this has been the whole joke, is that it's been the rich people who have taken it from the poor, and they're playing the left and right against each other while they run away. They abscond with the money and the wealth and the power. That's the real story. But you look at people like that, and your heart goes out to them, because I worked at Procter & Gamble, P&G, Punjabis and Gujaratis, as I call it, for years. And, you know, I remember thinking that there was a man there who was, I won't bore everybody with the bands, but he was a band 3 level. That's like a third level. At the time, I was a band 1, I think, or band 2. And, you know, there was somebody who just got promoted to a band 3. And he had been a band 3 for a long time, like 15 years. And this person got promoted, and within 2-3 months, they were in meetings, and she was speaking to him like they were just on the same level.
Right.
Now they are, and this is the analogy, because equal people will say, hey, they're equal, right? Bitch, you just got here. He's been in his slot for 15 years. He knows way more than you. He's older than you. Like, chill out a little bit, like, learn from him. You got to have some level of respect for people who came before you. That doesn't mean you to be, yes, massa. You don't have to go down your knees and wash their feet. I'm not saying that, but there's a tonality of uppity minorities, which, like, guys, white people have been here a long time. And it's cool to blare, you know, Beware the Boys outside your car, and, like, you know, throw down some of that new stuff and whatever. Like, it's cool to do that. I'm not saying don't be proud of your culture. Right. But when you flip it and you're like, white people are lame, you're part of the racist patriarchy. Yes, I get it. But then you're also the same people who are having no sense of humor about it. You're just so absolute, like, don't make fun of my people, but you're a white piece of crap in a lawn chair. Like, I'm saying it ironically to be like, okay, I'm obviously joking, like, whatever. But people are like, you're part of the problem, and they're just kicking these people around. It's like, not only are you trying to act like you're on their level, you're trying to one up these people. And Donald Trump comes out and he goes, it's okay to be white, it's okay to be male, it's okay to be straight. And obviously my issue with him is that he's not just making it okay, saying it's our country, we're taking it back. Right. That's the problem. But as far as making people feel part of the culture again, that's a powerful thing. And that's where liberals have overstepped. And I want a Democrat. I want liberals to move forward. I want the right parts of wokeness to move forward. But when you have Juicy Smollett, I know this, I'm talking about it.
Juicy Smollett.
Juicy Smollett. These things, I was yelling at the TV. Hersha, my wife, is like, Kashmir. I go, yeah, because he's taking us backwards. When you overreach like that, and there's some of the shows, some of the comedians you've talked about have overreached, And again, pushing the envelope is fine, but sometimes I'm like, guys, go slow to go fast. You are going to upset the apple cart. And Obama, for a lot of ways, was too much of a centrist, but there's some things that he did were too liberal, and Trump is the backlash against that. So sorry, I want this to be more of a conversation, but you're sparking.
No, you're absolutely right. No, I like it. I like it when the guests talk, because that's why I want to have them over. And that is an interesting point that you make about Trump being sort of a bit of a backlash to Obama. And I heard someone describe it in a really funny way. I can't remember who it was for the life of me, but it was something like, Obama was basically like you being in a stable marriage for 20 years. And then you're in a stable marriage for 20 years, and then you hit your midlife crisis, and you're like, I'm gonna date a batshit crazy 21-year-old now.
That's funny.
Right?
That's a good analogy. I always thought of it as like we were throwing a party, and then our parents came home. Like the chaperones are home now. They're like, all right, put everything away, and it's like the party's over. But I like that analogy. That's good.
Yeah, and it is really funny when you really think about that analogy. And so I kind of agree as well, because this is something that Joe Rogan also said on his show, where he said that I would prefer the culture to be more liberal than more conservative. And I agree with that, because I think, generally speaking, when the culture is more liberal, the society progresses more. So I am right there with that sentiment as well. When they say that, oh, Silicon Valley and all these tech billionaires, they're all left leaning. I think I would rather have them liberal leaning than conservative leaning, if I'm being perfectly honest. But at the same time, I think, for these, when I see these late night comedians, Colbert, Seth Meyers, Trevor Noah, all of these guys, and their entire show in a way is centered around Trump and conservatives, which I understand. I fully understand, because Trump is an absolute God-given gift to comedians. He is. There's no denying that.
In a lot of ways.
He gives you a lot of material.
But in a lot of ways, yes.
Yeah. So I mean, at the very least, he gives you a lot of material.
That is true.
Right. So I can completely understand that you can have entire shows dedicated to Trump, because every day he almost one-ups himself. So I get that. But at the same time, I just wonder that if you're a blue collar guy in some Midwestern state, and you're watching this and you voted for Trump, and yeah, maybe you don't agree with everything Trump does, but you voted for him. You're just like, all right, I did not like Hillary one bit. I voted for this guy. And all mainstream media comedians are doing is just crapping on him all day, all night. There's no word about what the Democrats are doing at all. And it's all Trump, 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 Trump. And I can understand, if I put myself in that guy's shoes, I might not agree with him, but I can understand him getting very frustrated with that.
Of course.
Being from the Midwest yourself, I wonder if you can see that too.
100%. I think you hit the nail on the head. And I have a lot of friends who are blue collar white men in Ohio, and white collar too, and everything else. So yes, I go back and I talk to them, and I'm connected to them. They're still my friends, and they come to my shows, despite the fact that I'm very openly hostile towards the president.
Right.
But we're still friends. We go back so many years, right? And all that stuff. We've been in that 20-year marriage you talked about. So we've been together a long time. So I think the hard part for me is, it's the what, vinegar and honey, or the sun and the wind story, where it's, the sun and the wind are trying to get a man to take off his coat, or a woman to take off her coat, right? So, and not be sexual. So the idea of, the wind blows harder and harder, and then the woman just holds onto her coat, and then the sun comes out, and then she takes off her coat, right? So the idea of that analogy being, the more you rail against this guy, right, it's almost as if, like in an argument, if you sit down and you're like, honey, these are the things I could have done better, she's going to defend you, right? If you're like, well, I did this right, and you messed me over, and you had me fill up the gas tank when it was half full, and I wanted to wait till I was coasting in on fumes. You always do this to me, and then you just induce it to this part. She's of course going to defend herself, right? But if you're like, well, I should have cleaned up around the house, and I probably could have done this a little better, she's going to defend you. She's going to, if she's a normal person, she's going to be like, well, no, I guess I could have been a little better, or it could have been a little bit more understanding. And that's what you're supposed to do, right? And so I think that's if we keep railing against him, now on the one hand, he's so bad, and we do have to call things out, because I think the media tried this for a while where they didn't call him out and his poll numbers went up because we're like, oh, maybe he's being normal now. No, you got to call things out. But I think you got to call out the other side. And in my opinion, I mean, this is why my show is written the way it is. I'm very blatant about the fact that, guys, the right is more harmful than the left. Okay, the left is harmful, the things they're doing, but the right's more harmful. And why is that? Because I go, look, the show, even if it's an hour and a half long, I'm on stage for an hour and a half. I'm off stage for 22 and a half hours. And the left is making it harder for me to be funny, but the right is making it harder for me to live life. And so there is going to be a bias against the right, and I think there is going to be that. But being men of color, we know that we're men, and so we have male privilege, but we're people of color, so we have that disadvantage, right? So it's almost like being a white woman, and that we see both sides of it, right? Women, they have that disadvantage, but then you have they have the whiteness and they have that. So we have our brownness. So we're in an interesting position to be able to kind of see it both ways. And I'll say that to Hersha, like, I'll just say, you know, when I hear people just rail against men and like men are the problem and it's toxic masculinity, I go, you know, if this keeps up, then I'll vote for Trump. Then screw you guys. You know what? Because not everything we did was bad. Men didn't just totally destroy the planet. We did a lot of things that are wrong. I'm not defending all men everywhere, but come on, dude. Like, I mean, maleness is not just wrong. You can't just come against us like that. Like, that's totally not okay. So you get that visceral, like,
you get that visceral reaction, right?
Trump. Now I get it, right? I'm not gonna vote for the dude. I hate the dude, but you get it. You get that sense, right? That's what it is.
Yeah, it is. It is very interesting. There's another question on the super chat. Somebody was asking, Blinky Blue was asking, you know, do you think it's that politics should be kept out of comedy? And that sort of brings me to your show, Man in the Middle. And so to just prime, you know, the people listening about your show, how political do you keep it, you know, during any regular show?
If it's not my tour, I feel like similarly, politics is a part of me. It's not going to be the whole show. And I think that comedians who pick a topic and go, they tend to rise very quickly. And I've always been, I work clean, so it's going to move a little slower. But I also want to be a holistic person. I want to do it autobiographical. So you have a slower climb because people don't really know in which box to place you. So politics to me has generally been 10 to 15% of the act. I think that, you know, this happened with Amy Schumer, and it's happened with other comics as well. And this is a while ago, but a lot of 200 or 300 people walked out of her show. Now, there were thousands of people there, so we got to put context. She's obviously very successful. But I think that comedians have a knee-jerk reaction as to, well, can I talk about politics? You can if it's a joke, right? And even if it's a joke that misses, and that's where I talked about, I think in the article, about intense, and you're playing golf and you're taking some practice swings, right, with a mic. I talked about this with Shane Gillis not getting Saturday Night Live, saying, well, it's a joke. Well, yeah, but you're a comedian, but not everything you say is a joke. Right? I mean, sometimes, a lot of times with interviews, people are like, I thought it'd be funnier. He's like philosophizing. Yeah, because we tend to do that because, we're going to be funny on stage, and hopefully I'm funny enough in real life. But in golf, you're taking those practice swings, and you go up and you really try to hit it, and sometimes you miss. And you say to your friends, no, I was just practicing, and they're all laughing their ass off. Like, you clearly were trying to hit the ball, right? But Shane Gillis, the man who did not get Saturday Night Live, hey, these are just jokes. Bro, we can hear you. Like, people aren't stupid. They can tell what a joke is and what a joke isn't. So when Amy Schumer is pontificating about politics, we didn't come here to watch you pontificate. We came here to watch you do jokes. If you do political jokes, even if they're liberal and we're conservative, they're conservative, we're liberal, we'll let you pass because maybe the joke wasn't funny, maybe we didn't laugh at maybe we didn't agree with it, whatever. But you're still doing jokes, so you're a comedian. We'll begrudge you that. But if you get up there and you rant, right? I think in a 60-minute set, if you go, guys, I need 1 minute just to rant, they'll give you that because you set expectations. But if you just go, I think people are like, oh, is the comedy over now? And you're gonna hold us hostage, and this you really want to talk about? This is the real you. So I think as long as you're going for a joke, it's okay. Or if you set expectations, it's okay. If you come to a political comedy show, you have to be aware of the fact that obviously I'm going to talk about politics. But that said, my director, Pat Hazel, this writer for Seinfeld, this amazing man in Austin, Texas, he said, look, nobody wants to go to a theater and watch a man talk about another man. It's like being on a date, right? You're out with a woman, you're out with somebody. You want them to talk about them. You want them to talk about us, right? Oh, why are you talking about this other dude, right? So it's like, let's talk about us. So it's the same thing. He's like, Trump's not in the room, you are. People want to hear your story. The show's not about Trump, it's about you. And I come back to the fact that even though the goal of the show is to oust Trump from office, I did the show in Cincinnati. More than half Trump supporters, I got a standing ovation. So I feel like if you come see my show, it's inclusive enough that I'm not just railing against the president. I'm not just saying Trump supporters are idiots. My dad voted for Trump. So that isn't going to work. Right?
Well, there's a story right there, right?
Yeah, it's about reconciliation and trying to find a way forward. So I think Trump's going to win again. That's my fear anyway. So
that's what I think too, which is crazy because, you know, when Trump won in 2016, I think the very next day, Conan O'Brien had Bill Burr on his show, and Bill Burr said something that was very, you know, Bill Burr, he's a weird guy where he's a really funny guy where he's like, he says something in a rant which often tends to be like very profound. Like he's ranting, but he'll say something in that rant which is very profound. And I'm like, I wonder how he does that. But he said that, you know, what's that?
He's every comedian's favorite comedian.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
And he said that, you know, this guy during the election campaign on a daily basis said something that would torpedo anyone else's campaign. But he just went from strength to strength to strength. Yeah. And I feel like during his presidency, something similar is happening. I don't know if he's going from strength to strength, but his presidency is not in the grave danger that people thought it would be.
It's not. It's I think it's like we're really going to get him this time, and it's almost like a reverse action flick where he's the villain, and it's almost, you know, every action flick, Bruce Willis, how is he going to get out of it this time? You know, Mel Gibson, I guess in real life didn't, but Mel Gibson, how's he going to get out of it this time? And you're just like, oh my gosh, Shahrukh, he's in this position. Like, how's SRK going to, you know, get the ropes off, and Tom Cruise, how are they going to get, you know, the ship is sinking, and they're not going to die.
Yeah.
How are they going to live? And it's almost like Trump is cast in that role. You're like Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi and all these guys are coming in, and he's going to and that's why I say he's going to win again, because I'm not, what did George Bush say in, there's a saying now in Texas, in Tennessee, we'll probably have it here. Fool me once, shame on you. We can't get fooled again, right? Right? And you just can't find the phrase. But you can't get fooled again. I'm not going to be fooled again. I was in this house. I crumpled to the floor when Trump won, and I'm like, I'm not going to let that happen. I'm not. Each time I thought that he's going to be taken out. Right. I think there's a much higher probability that he's removed from office than people are saying, and I'll tell you why. I think that President Pence, the idea of President Pence for most Republicans. My wife is a pharmacist, and he's like the new and improved version without the side effects. And that's Pence. He gives them everything they want, judges, tax cuts, all that stuff without the drama. Right. And if they could get in a room, especially if it's a secret vote, but even if it's not, and they all get in a room, and it's a very narrow article of impeachment, and they all go in, and Ben Sasse from Nebraska, the Republican senator, said at least 35 Republicans could do it. And they all just get him out of office, and it's done. They rip off the Band-Aid. Pence is there's nothing Trump can do, and it's Pence, and he picks like Condoleezza Rice or somebody. That's a formidable foe. Pence is a formidable foe. He could win next year.
Do you think so, though?
Yeah, I think so. I think Trump is a stronger candidate for the Republicans, but Pence is no pushover.
Really?
He's not.
That is very interesting. Like I never really, considered the idea of Pence squaring off against Democratic candidates, just because you see Trump as such a force of nature, at least in the election cycle, of just drumming up his base into such a frenzy that they can't help but go out and vote for him, because he's convinced them somehow that if they don't vote for him, America will disappear.
Yeah, I mean, that has been very effective, and people are just like, oh, if the Democrats go for impeachment, they're all going to get turned up. They live turned up. They live fired up, right? And there's a part in LA Confidential, that's one of the Best Picture nominees from 1997, where it's got Kevin Spacey, it's got Russell Crowe, and there's a part where Guy Pearce is going up against him, and he's a good cop, and Bud White is Russell Crowe's character is the bad cop, and they're like, and the Irish man is just like, it's best to stay away from a man when his blood is up, and he's like, his blood's always up, and it's this great scene where they're literally coming to blows. And people are like, oh, you're going to wake the beast. The beast is already alive, dude.
Already up.
They're already in the arena fighting. Like, I don't know, you know, his strong support went up from 27 to 35. Fine. It's still not enough to win. They're going to show up regardless. That doesn't matter. You have to energize your base. And that's where, as much as I like Joe Biden, dude's not going to make it. Okay. If right now.
Well, he's already slipping in the polls, right? Like, I think Warren's catching up with him, isn't she?
I think Warren probably is going to win the nomination.
Wow.
Probably. I originally said Biden and Harris, but I'm always wrong about my early predictions. I think the ticket that wins 350 plus electoral votes, despite the fact that he's young, despite the fact that he's gay, you look at somebody like Mayor Pete, you're a Midwestern guy, Mayor Pete, it's always a young, fresh Democrat that wins. Kennedy wins, then there's an asterisk because you have Lyndon B. Johnson, but then you have McGovern and Humphreys, the older establishment candidate, they lose. Jimmy Carter, 8 years, Georgia to presidency, fresh face wins. Then you have Walter Mondale who loses, you have Michael Dukakis who loses, but then you have Bill Clinton, fresh face wins, 2 terms. Then you run Al Gore, the establishment candidate, loses. John Kerry, establishment, loses. Barack Obama, out of nowhere, wins. Then you run Hillary Clinton, the old establishment candidate, loses. You run Joe Biden, Democrats do not have a good track record with this. He's too old. People will say that's ageism. I don't care.
You feel the same way about Bernie?
Bernie's too old. He's too old. These guys are too old. I know people mind that. I know that my idea is like, because the AARP is the strongest lobby in Washington, I think if you're over 70, you should have to take a driver's test. I think you should have to take a vision test. I mean, it's crazy. People are like, oh, we don't respect old people. No, we respect old people too much in this country. It's crazy that we give them way too many. No, you got it. It's crazy. People, if you see the way they drive on the road, they're way too old to be in office. They're not going to be around for the consequences of their decisions. They're too old. Okay, they're too old. Even Elizabeth Warren, who's 71, is kind of pushing it. That's why I think.
Is she really 71?
She's 71, I think.
Damn, I didn't know that.
But she doesn't look it.
Yeah, she doesn't look
like
71.
they're vigorous. Look, there are old people who are 95.
It's the Native American blood, probably.
But people under 30 and people over 70, come on, they don't.
Yeah.
They don't know anything.
Do you feel that do you feel like Buttigieg has a chance at all? I don't think so.
I don't think he's going to win the nomination, which is bad, because I think he could. I look at somebody who could put on a factory hat and go to talk to workers in Ohio on a factory floor. I used to work on a factory floor, and I'm telling you, Mayor Pete, coupled up, and she said a month ago that she wants the VP slot. Stacey Abrams from Georgia. She's a Black woman. It empowers African Americans. It empowers and energizes women. Mayor Pete, Stacey Abrams, that 350 plus electoral votes. They win Arizona, they win Georgia, they win Indiana. They win landslide. I'm telling you that. But I don't think it's going to be Mayor Pete. I think the solution is sitting right there. I think Biden would physically collapse. I like the man. I think he will physically collapse. I think Bernie will physically collapse as he did. Elizabeth Warren is very interesting. I like Elizabeth Warren. She's a capitalist who's got some socialist ideas. Like Bill Maher said, gin on its own is disgusting. Tonic on its own is disgusting. Tonic is a great cocktail. I'm middle. She's a little bit left for me. I don't like the idea about getting rid of private insurance, but she's going to be a counterbalance. Her most radical ideas are not going to get through anyway. So let's put her in office. She's going to take the conversation left. It's going to balance things out after Trump. You get Elizabeth Warren, Stacey Abrams, an all-female ticket. I don't know if that would do it. I'd say run it. I'd say run Warren and Abrams, and let's roll the dice.
Do you think Warren has a shot against Trump? Because what I hear from sort of the other side of the aisle, some of the commentators from the other side of the aisle, they look at it as Hillary 2.0.
I think she could have won in 2016. I said this because I thought she was the right amount of Bernie and the right amount of Hillary. I said this in 2016. I go, it's too bad she's not running. I think she's the right mix. She's 99% Bernie and 1% Hillary. That's a good mix. I think that I liked Hillary. I voted for Hillary. But I think Warren, I was at a Hindu American Foundation event in Sacramento, And somebody next to me said, my problem with Elizabeth Warren is she comes off as too much of that older female professor. You know who said it to me? An older female professor. It was somebody who I go, man, if you're saying this, and I know because she comes across as the stern taskmaster.
Right.
But, you know, Chris Rock said, your jokes are not smart if only smart people get them.
Yeah.
And that's my issue with Elizabeth Warren. A lot of the smart people like Elizabeth Warren. Will she energize that left base? Yeah, she probably will. But will she have a lot of men who are like, I don't want to be talked to like I'm in school and like I'm in class?
Yeah.
To the extent that she plays up the Harvard professor angle, she would probably lose. But she's also a girl who grew up in Oklahoma. She talks about I grew up with a girl in Oklahoma. If she can make that connection, you know, she speaks in everyday analogies. I mean, I think it was Noam Chomsky or one of them had said, you know, it's not that Americans can't talk politics because they can't hold data in their head. Have you ever heard men talk about fantasy football? Every single thing, man, yards per carry, freaking how many yards up.
It is crazy.
How many
it is crazy.
And how many, you know, per game, and they go all the way down to the decimal point and the point after, and they can analyze, should we go for the 2-point conversion? And, you know, there's so much complexity with game of football.
Yeah.
And yet Americans are able to hold that many facts in their head, and they can argue who the greatest quarterback is ever, and they'll give you all of their stats and their Heismans and all the stuff and their all their accolades. And they can hold complicated ideas in their head. And Elizabeth Warren gives good analogies. She talks about Amazon, and now she's like, if you're playing a game, you can either play or you can be the umpire, but you can't be both. And right now they're playing in that they have their third-party vendors and they're selling stuff. They're also the platform. You can't be the umpire and the player. That's an analogy everybody can understand. And if she talks that way and she talks plainly, yeah, I mean, who else are we going to run? Kamala Harris isn't going to win.
No.
Biden's not going to do it. I think I like Tulsi, but she's fighting over like, oh, I should be on the debate stage. You're at 2%. I mean, I love her. I think we need.
I think she should use this term to sort of get her name out there and to get into the mainstream Democratic conversation. I think that should be her best bet for this campaign. Right.
I completely agree with you. Sorry, our plumber's here, and I got to text him.
Oh no, you're all good. No, I was, and it is interesting to see Elizabeth Warren. It is going to be very interesting to see Elizabeth Warren against Trump, because Trump's a troll. Trump's an internet troll. Trump's an internet troll who became president, essentially. And there was a bit of a culture in 2016 where people just wanted an internet troll to just rub somebody's face in it, rub Hillary's face in it, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Show her what you're all about. I don't know if we're over that trend yet about, you know, being an internet troll, just going and just trolling somebody into oblivion. And I feel like that's the danger that Warren runs into, especially with the whole Pocahontas thing that happened, you know, that people really enjoyed that. People of a certain, you know, people on the internet made hay with it.
It was funny.
It's going to be a very interesting. Yeah, I mean, it was funny, right? It was funny. People made hay with it. And it's going to be very interesting to see how somebody like Warren, so well-spoken, so, you know, almost matronly in a way when she speaks, how she's going to match up against like a street fighter, essentially, like Trump.
It all depends on how she fights, right? And she is a fighter. And I think the line is, this bastard has made the whole thing about him. It's about you. America, it's about you. Forget this guy. We did it. We tried the crazy 21-year-old girlfriend or whatever it was. We had our midlife crisis, to extend that analogy that you gave. Guys, can we get back? It's not about me. I couldn't care less. It's about you. And if Democrats can make that pivot, if they can make the pivot away from this dude just about himself, and if she can talk to those factory workers and bring them in, she's still white, right? So if she comes in and she can do that, and she can send Stacey Abrams to the places that she needs to go to, it's gonna be close. I don't know that we're gonna win, but it scares me. I mean, it scares me. It all depends. But Americans like a fighter. People like a fighter. Bill Maher said that Americans don't vote on issues; they vote on strength versus weakness.
Yeah.
And you know, a bully does not respect you when you stand down. They respect you when you hit them and you kick them in the balls. And you have to just go for it. And that's why when Democrats are like, well, we don't want to try impeachment, you guys look like pussies, man. You have to step up. You have to make a case. And you know, you don't go, well, the Yankees are too good, so we're just not going to go play. It's like, you have to go play the game. You have to play the game. I mean, I grew up watching tennis about Federer, he's so good, Nadal, he's so good, Djokovic. Yeah, but they lose too. They don't always win. And so I want to see you like in A Few Good Men, where Demi Moore says, I want you to stand up and make an argument. And that's what people want. They want you to stand up and make an argument. They want you to fight. And if he makes it about Pocahontas and all that, you know, you said that he's a troll. He's a heckler. And I said this in my LA show last Friday of Man in the Middle. There's one sound that comedians can't do anything with. There's one sound. We can deal with boos, we can deal with hisses, we can deal with howls, we can obviously deal with laughter, we can even deal with silence. One sound we cannot deal with, it's when people go, and when people go, it's this like condescending acknowledgement that, you know, it's almost like, I give the analogy that you walk up to a woman at a bar, and if you try to talk to her and she's with her friend and she's like, get the F out of my face, dick, right? That doesn't hurt nearly as bad as if she looks at her friend and she's like, right? And she just kind of like throws you under the bus in a subtle manner.
It's a dagger.
But as a bitch, or like screw her. But the second one, you're like, oh man, I kind of liked her, and that audience kind of liked her. They were like, shh. And I think or Elizabeth Warren, when he just comes at her on the stage and creeps up from behind and all that, and she's just like, okay, let's talk about you, America. Let's talk about care, okay? And she has this little bit of a sense of humor about it, which that I don't know if she has, because the eternal debate amongst comedians is, does Trump have a sense of humor? I don't know. I don't know how self-aware he is about how funny or not he is. Right. Like when he got up at the Al Smith Catholic dinner and he goes, hell of a dinner. Like, does he know the irony of saying hell at a Catholic dinner? But I'm watching him. I'm like the intent thing. Like, is he really swinging? Is it?
There was that. Did you see that meme that he posted when there was all this talk about like him buying Greenland? And he posted this meme that I'm not going to build the Trump hotel in Greenland or something. Right. I thought that was funny, but I don't know like what he's like. Does he mean it? What is he trying to do?
I don't know. I'm not sure where this man is coming from half the time. So that's the caginess in him. I do think he's beatable. I think people are tired. I think if you run, it's a good campaign, a good candidate with good campaign. She made her mistake early with Pocahontas. She walked into the trap, but she's coming. And I've heard in her inner circles that Trump is really frustrated by this. Usually he's Mike Tyson. My left stroke's a death stroke. Right. You know, it's like if he got one punch on you, you were done. Mike Tyson, one punch straight on you were down. And that, you know, Trump's from that WWE fighting world and Joe Rogan and all this. He's from that fighting, strapping world. It was one punch, son, and you were down. He hit her and she's come back. You know, she's risen like a phoenix. And so I don't know. I think it would be close, but I could see an election where she also wins in a landslide. I could see that.
Wow, that's very cool. So, finally, talking about man in the middle. What kind of stuff do you usually an audience going to the show, somebody that's not necessarily, let's say, familiar with your work, what can they expect at Man in the Middle?
You know, I talked to my director about this, and we talked about making it, something like 50% funny, 20% insightful, 30% poignant, or whatever it was. And he was like, let's just make sure it's 100% human. Right. And that's really key, is just to make sure you're talking like a human being. You're not preaching to people. I think people want, again, in a 90-minute show, they'll take 2 to 3 minutes of preaching. Sure, that's what I'm a smart guy. I follow this stuff. Yeah, you can get on your soapbox. I have literally a soapbox, and I think again the self-awareness of it, of going, guys, I know I'm getting a little preachy here. As long as people know you know that, they know you have the self-awareness to be like, all right, you're waxing a little philosophical, but it's got to be funny. You're a comedian. If people leave and they're like, well, that wasn't funny, well then they won't be happy. I won't be happy. I want them to think I'm funny. I want them to know I'm funny, but. I think at the end of the day, it's something where people have left the show going, I did learn something, but it was fun. I kind of felt sometimes like I was in class, but here's a professor who knows what's up. Like he knows how to talk to us. And we've all had those professors, right? We're like, you know, it felt a little bit like a lecture sometimes, but it was fun. And it's kind of a scene because people you know will be there, and you've got different mixes of people, and it's a party, and I play music on the way in and the way out, and it's supposed to feel a little bit like, hey, we're all in this together. And I do feel like definitely the show is funny enough. That's always your insecurity as a comedian. Like, is it funny enough? But yeah, there's a lot of laughs. There's a lot of those moments. And I think people can expect it to be funny, and they can expect to learn something. And I think comedy has moved in that direction. I just watched Gary Gulman's The Great Depression, and it was really great. You know, you talk about how comedy has moved into that touchy-feely, more of that wokeness, and he talks about generational things. And sometimes people are like, why? I go, because the single camera shows of following people around that was the next evolution, right? The multi-camera setup punch jokes, they still exist, but we've done them for decades. So now we're going into this world where comedy is hopefully still funny, but we've got something more as well. And because they can get funny stuff, they can get memes, they can get that stuff online, right? If you just want to read jokes or get a meme or see somebody falling, or you can get just straight belly laughs from the internet. But what you're not going to get is that theatrical experience. You're not going to get that human experience of somebody sharing a story and talking about himself or herself. And why are we doing that? Because you see reflections of yourself in there, right? That's the idea of, like, I'm taking a picture of the audience. Yeah, I've got the camera, but you're seeing yourself in the picture, and that's the point.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right, let's take a couple of questions from Patreon before we wrap up. There's Shiv Shankar Pemasani who's wondering if, you know, people who lean more right find your jokes palatable, and do you think that comedians try to cater to that audience at all?
I do. I do some pro-conservative jokes. I do a joke about immigration, and you know, I did this joke at an Indian Chamber of Commerce event, and I won't say the city, just not to impugn the person who walked up to me. It wasn't Indian, but I do a joke about immigration where I say, guys, I can see it both ways because I'm from Ohio. I understand the conservative argument against amnesty for illegals. I get it, because you know, they see us, especially uncles, be like, we came to this country legally, we came here legally. I'm like, well, you have no choice, right? India's really far away. Mexico's right next door. Don't give yourselves too much credit. Like, give yourselves credit for following the system, but don't give yourselves that much credit. Like, we say fresh off the boat. Nobody came here on a boat, literally. Like, nobody came here on a boat, and we don't smell very fresh. We're not fresh off the boat. We're like sail off the plane, right? So let's not get too uppity about that, A. And then B, I get the intellectual argument against amnesty for illegals, because people who came here legally want you to do it the right way. It'd be like if I broke into your room, sir, and I look at somebody in the audience, I go, I know, if I broke into your house, and I'm like, I know I should not have done that, but now that I'm here, can I have my own room? And then I do the liberal side of the joke. But I had a Latino guy came up to me, and he's like, you shouldn't be doing those kinds of jokes. He was really angry. He's like, that's a very pro-white, very anti-brown joke. I looked at him, I said, man, look, I got to give both sides of it. And that's also how I feel. I don't feel like you should come here legally. I can understand it. There should be an asylum process, and I'm all for that. But I don't think it's fair to people who came here legally. My cousins who waited years and years to come here, and now they're here and they came here legally. So there are jokes like that. I mean, there are some things that I do that are pro-gun, and you know, and things like that. So, and pro some of the U.S. foreign policy. So I do think that I am in the middle. I think Trump has taken the country very far to the right. I said I didn't go crazy; the country went crazy. I've been standing right here, so I probably look more left. But that's just because the water has moved out, and now like left on the beach. But I was always up to my waist. And now the water has run out, and now I'm just completely exposed. And I need my lungi or something, you know. Need my lungi. But I think that's the idea. People who are conservative, I've had people ask me that question, and they've left happy. Nobody's thrown out of it. So
nice. There's another question from Roshan Raj, who's wondering, is there any merit to the argument that only left-leaning comedians are promoted in the mainstream?
I think that is probably true. I think Sham talked about how there's a cultural establishment, left-leaning comedians. I think this is the danger for Democrats. Trump went to Howdy Modi, right? And a lot of Democrats steered clear of that. And, you know, I had somebody who liked Modi, who then is off the Modi train because he talked so pro-Trump, right? And Modi had to walk that line, but she didn't feel like he really walked the line. She felt like he leaned too heavily into Trump. Trump is making a smart play here by realizing he only lost by 79,000 votes in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania.
Right.
If they cease to turn for him, that's the difference. That could be the difference right there. Any demographic that's even that small, and obviously we're gaining power and political power as well. There's a danger for Democrats right now, and Bill Maher has been talking about this. I don't agree with everything Bill Maher says, but I agree with everything Bill Maher says. I think that his atheism drives me crazy and his smugness drives me crazy, but his position on issues, I think, is generally almost always spot on. And there's a danger for Democrats who are leaning too far into Islam and always defending Islam. And look, our contractor who's coming over in a few minutes is Muslim. My roommate for 2 years was Hassan Minhaj. I have a lot of Muslim friends, as people are not
right.
that group say. That's not true. I'm not going to say anything anti-Islam. What I'm going to say, though, is there's no examination. It's just, let's just defend the religion. Let's not look at the sexism. Let's not look at the homophobia. But they will look at Christians and go, well, they're homophobic. Yep, they're anti-this, they're anti-that. They can just destroy Christianity.
And there's a section, I think, among the Indian American population that feels that, again, Hinduism is also fair game, which it should be. But then certain other cultures aren't.
Everything should be fair game. Yeah. And siphoning, if Democrats are looked at as too pro-Islam and pro-Muslims, which, hey, be inclusive, the squad, Talib, and all these folks, cast a big tent, okay? I'm not saying don't cast a big tent. But that said, if you siphon, and the perception is that the Democrats are going to be pro-Muslim, you're going to have a lot of Hindus who are going to have a knee-jerk reaction. Part of the reason my dad voted for Trump, he's a Hindu. And he grew up, he walked the line of partition. I talk about this in the show. And he had to lose everything he had, leave Pakistan. He's wary about China, and he's getting older. He's thinking more about his homeland. You're going to have these Hindus who are going to vote Republican, even though he doesn't agree with almost anything else Trump does. But there's a knee-jerk reaction against this. Again, it's not we don't want Muslims here, things like that. It's not that. But if it's seen as there's no examination and it's just a blanket acceptance, you don't blanketly accept Hindus, you don't blanketly accept Christians. Why are we going to these lengths to blanketly accept any religion? Right. I would have a problem if we're all Hindus. Like, we don't have it 100% right. Right. We have a lot of things right. We don't have things 100% right. I think we need to examine everything. Just we're talking about toxic masculinity. I'm not defending all men. I'm not defending all gays, all straights. Everything should be examined. Right. And when you have comedians who are just leaning to one side, you're going to have this knee-jerk or even gradual reaction where if you have enough Hindus in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania who vote for Trump, that could tip the election. And so this idea of the establishment, the left establishment, only embracing left comedians, I think we should establish who's funny. That's really who should be established.
Right. Yeah. No, fair enough. And finally, about your show, are you still touring?
I am still touring. Okay. Thanks for asking. Good question. And I've done 8 cities so far. I think it's 6, 7 states, some blue, some red, Texas, Kentucky, some other red states as well have been in the mix. Ohio, which is a red state right now. So I'm going to Capitol Hill. I take the show on October 30th of 2019 this year to the U.S. House of Representatives. So you can go to seerajiv.com. That's SEERAJIV.com. Follow me on social media at Funny Indian and get more information on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. It's a free show. You can't profit off of a government job. Who would do that? And we're going to invite representatives, the press, senators, President Pence, all these people. So we're going to see whom we can get in the room. So send your friends and family in Washington, D.C. and go to that website. Follow me because I will be adding a lot more shows. I'm going to Skokie, Illinois, close to your neck of the woods.
Oh, wow. When's that going to be?
The Skokie Theater, which I did a couple of years ago. The Skokie Theater, I think it's January 17th, whatever that Friday is.
Oh, that's awesome.
Coming to your neck of the woods in Chicago. Going to Atlanta in January, still setting up a date. And the idea is to run this all the way through the election. And I think that I've been focusing on what I've been doing so far, but hopefully we're going to be adding a lot of states, maybe even going abroad, because I think people overseas, in fact, want to hear from what's going on in the belly.
I just had a question from the audience. Nikkei was wondering if you'll do some stand-up in Delhi sometime or in India in general.
I would love to come back to Delhi. I performed there at the Canvas Laugh Club. I was there for the Most Influential Young Indians Awards with GQ. I did that in Delhi last year. It's actually in Bombay, Mumbai. start any things there now on that one. My dad grew up in Bombay, so he could only call it Bombay. So I'm going back to Bombay to do that show again with GQ. They wanted me to host the Men of the Year Awards, which I did last year. They wanted me to do that but I was booked. So I'll be coming back to India, to Bombay. I'd like to come back to Delhi as well, Bangalore. My friend Azhar Usman, also from Chicago, he and I have toured all over India, and I performed, I think, every southern state, maybe 7 or 8 of the states over there. So it's always fun to come back to India and go back to the motherland.
Awesome. So again, guys, you can catch his show. What's the website again? If you can just tell people again where they can buy tickets for your show.
My website is funnyindian.com, and you can follow me at Funny Indian on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, everything. But if you want information specifically about the show, you can go to my website or follow me, but go to crajiv.com. That's S-E-E, like C-S-E-E-R-A-J-I-V.com. I, not W. So. All
right. Awesome. Well, there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you like it, share it. If you're in the area on the 30th or around the 30th, go check out the event. I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope to come around to Skokie when you're in Skokie in January as well. So again, thanks a ton for coming on the show, Rajiv. It was really fun talking to you.
A blast, Sham. Thank you so much. Really great speaking to you as well. You're a great host, and just very, very good questions, very insightful questions. And I got to get you on mine because I want to hear what you have to say about all this as well.
Oh, for sure. I'd love to. Just name the time and place, and I'm there.
Let's do it. Name the time and place, and I'll be there 2 hours late, like today.
All right. Let's do it then. All right, guys. Again, if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe, make sure to share, comment, like. Everything helps. So do your part. And this episode is on YouTube right now, but it'll be available as a podcast soon as well. So keep an eye out for that. Other than that, stay happy, stay healthy, and I will see you guys soon.